The long wait is finally over. The Chicago Fire are going back to the MLS Cup Playoffs for the first time since 2017, doing so with a thrilling 5-goal victory down in Miami over Messi and Friends, and then a 2-0 win over the Crew. Meanwhile, Philip Zinckernagel broke Nemanja Nikolic's club goal contribution record in a season, still with a game to play. So who do the Fire owe their change in fortune to, and what can we look ahead to in the playoffs? I'm joined by Matt Doyle of MLSsoccer.com to talk about that and more next on CHGO Fire. This is CHGO Fire. I'm Alex Campbell, and welcome to a podcast that covers an MLS Cup playoff team. For the first time in 8 years, and in Greg Berhalter's first season, thank you, Sean. Doing things behind the scenes today. Fire headed back to the postseason, and to talk about all of that and what comes with it, I am joined by Major League Soccer's one-man encyclopedia, the armchair analyst himself, Matt Doyle, calling in from New York City. Thanks for joining us here on the show today.
Yeah, it's fun to be here and to actually talk about a playoff team for once, and not a far too early post-mortem, which has been the way for calling into any sort of Chicago Fire podcast since 2018. Tough.
Yeah. No. Usually by this time of the year, we are packed up, we are done. We have kind of fast forwarded to next season, but not in 2025. Just to recap things before we go to the big picture, the Fire, a few weeks ago, lost a pretty bad game at home to NYCFC, and then they've gone unbeaten since. 3-0 win up in Minnesota, 2-0 home win over the Crew, 5-3 down in Miami, and then they do draw with Toronto on the weekend in a game they were leading until quite late. This is the first time the Fire have gone unbeaten in the league over 4 matches since late March. But to be fair, those games included such illustrious opponents as DC United, FC Dallas, CF Montreal, and Toronto before their exodus of high-paid Italians. So I guess the big question there is, Matt, we talk about peaking at the right time. How impressed have you been by the Fire's recent form, which has maybe or maybe not coincidentally, intersected with a bit of a tactical switch from Greg Berhalter?
Yeah, so, I mean, these were tough and gutty wins over mostly good teams. I should say mostly wins over mostly good teams in a way that they hadn't been able to register for most of the season. Like if you look at the shape of what the Fire have done this year, they have beaten the DC Uniteds and CF Montreals of the world pretty handily and pretty consistently, which is why they have spent most of the season down around the red line, sometimes up above it, sometimes down below it. And then they had gotten their asses handed to them by the Miamis and Columbuses of the world for most of the year. And so to switch that was big, not just in terms of what it does in the standings, though obviously primarily for that reason, but also just the mentality to be able to compete with teams who have been killing you all year. Like that showed some real growth. And then, as you said, baked into it the past couple of games has been a switch to a sort of a 3-4-2-1. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if that is something that Greg Berhalter felt was necessary to get these results. Like, I could see that, especially against Miami, or I'm not sure if it was him just trying to figure out if there was another club in the bag that he could play in these big games. But either way, it very obviously worked, at least for a game and a half. And, to end up, 4 unbeaten at the end of this crucial 4-game stretch, I don't think anybody's going to have any complaints, even if it was a little bit disappointing at the end there against Toronto on the weekend.
Yeah, although I think you could say Georgi Mihailovic getting a goal playing the Fire at Soldier Field, it's like, yeah, just check that box off and and move on going forward. And with the back three, it really felt in that Minnesota game like that was a matchup scenario. With the way that Minnesota play, it works well because it's also kind of the way that Wilfried Nancy sets up his Crew team, and I think it's just kind of been this is this is working, but we're going to have to ride it out from there. The big loss, of course, and we'll talk about this more a bit later, is Andre Franco, or maybe we can get into that right now, actually, a guy who, you posted a video online, of just this ridiculous through ball he played a couple games back and how important he's been to the way the Fire have been playing. Now he tears his ACL, and sure, the Fire have lots of other guys who can play as, more or less a number 8 in central midfield, but, this just kind of puts a big downer not only on this season, but throws a wrench into a scenario where you've got a guy who's on loan with an option to buy, and now if you do exercise that option, you're doing so knowing you're going to go 6 months without that guy stepping on a field.
So traditionally in these types of scenarios, the team won't exercise the option, but if they like the player, they'll go back to the team that actually owns him and say, let's do this, but at a lower number. Right. And Franco's not in the plans with his team over in Portugal.
Correct.
He was so good. He was so good that I would be surprised if the Fire didn't find a way to bring him back. It just makes a lot of sense, even coming off an ACL injury, which it's an ACL tear, so it's a bad one. But ACL tears aren't career enders the way they used to be. So you can expect him to come back, and within 12 months, hopefully, be the guy that he was. It does change the calculus for what to expect from this year's Fire team, because if you look at it, when they were playing that 3-5-2, he was playing, as you said, he was playing as a number 8, not like a free 8 who would push up and be half a 10, but literally a game orchestrating, deep lying midfielder. And the reason I posted that clip, which was one of the best passes I've seen all season, is because it just illustrates how having a guy who could break multiple lines with one ball from that deep in midfield, it changes the way opponents have to defend and changes where the Fire can create danger from. In this case, it was Andrew Gutman pushing up. I think it makes, playing without him makes the 3-4-2-1 less functional, makes it less dangerous. And I think that's something that if Greg Berhalter wants to stick with it, he's going to have to solve for that. And unfortunately, running out of ladder to do that with just one game left in the season.
Right, and I think, we might have a nice bookend of the season. Franco kind of knocked Sergio Orejel out of the starting 11 mix, and I think Orejel is probably the closest like for like in terms of a guy with some passing range from that spot who you can also trust, unlike, say, maybe Brian Gutierrez, to do the defensive dirty stuff. So, we'll see what they roll out against New England after the international break. I mentioned in the open, the guy who's going to win Fire Player of the Season in just a hilarious runaway and is probably going to be, just like it's been the first time in 8 years since the Fire made the playoffs, the Fire are about to have their first MLS Best 11 inclusion in 8 years as well, because Philip Zinckernagel, 29 combined goals and assists, signed as a high-level TAM guy for reportedly right around $1 million. Was supposed to be a foil to the likes of Kuipers and Bamba. Only 3 of his 15 assists are of the MLS variety. 12 of his 15 are primary assists. I mean, I mentioned, Matt, you're a bit of an encyclopedia for this league. In terms of value for money, where does Philip Zinckernagel rank for you all time in terms of MLS signings?
I mean, he's up there. He certainly over-delivered on what expectations were for him heading. If you give this season to anyone outside of Messi, you would say lived up to expectations. That said, I hate to burst your bubble here. There's no chance he makes best 11. There is zero chance, because if you look at what Andres Dreyer has done for San Diego, if you look at what Denny Bouanga has done for LAFC, Sam Surridge for Nashville, and then Lionel Messi's for
get in.
Inter Miami. Yeah, there's only room for 3 of those guys, right? And then Zinckernagel and Martin Ojeda, both behind those guys, Evander behind those guys as well. I've been calling for years for MLS to do a best 11 and a second 11 and a third 11, the way the NBA does, first team, second team, third team, all NBA.
Right.
There is a great case for it this year because of players like Zinckernagel and Ojeda. And that's my cat's tail. Sorry about that to all your viewers. Recognizing the seasons that they've had. But even without that, look, man, Fire fans know how great he's been and he'll get a chance to show it to everybody in the playoffs. Because again, the Fire are there for the first time in 2017 since 2017. It's pretty remarkable.
Right. Now, I guess I was hoping for some shenanigans in terms of who counts as a midfielder. I think we've seen Evander count there for all-star game purposes, but yeah, no, it's and you don't even mention guys like obviously Pep Biel and Charlotte, who's dealt with some injuries down the stretch, and so his numbers kind of fell off a bit there. No, it has been a remarkable season for these winger 10 tweener kind of guys, and then Messi is going to be there. Surge has had an excellent year, as you mentioned, for Nashville. It's just, there's just too many guys, and also somehow I'm sure there will be internet discourse about how many votes Son Heung-min ends up getting, despite the fact that he only played like a third of a season. Before we take a break and then look at the playoff picture more as a whole and where the Fire might end up in it, obviously Zinckernagel gets the plaudits. Greg Berhalter, guy comes in, in his first season as both the coach and the sporting director, gets this team back in the postseason. When you've watched the Fire this season, is there kind of a less heralded name that you think has stuck out that hasn't quite gotten the headlines they maybe deserve for how this team's improved in 2025?
It's Jack Elliot. When they signed him, that was like the first thing they did last offseason, if I recall correctly, was sign him to a free agent deal. And like as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure the Fire are going to be pretty good next year, because Elliot didn't have the best season for Philly in 2024, but he's been a really good center back for a really long time. Not perfect this year, and it's weird because when he makes a mistake, you notice it. Like he's for whatever reason, like it tends to be a big one. But he's there every single game, and he keeps the floor high, and he changes the way they play because he's so good on the ball and so good in distribution. He's not going to get, he's another guy who's not going to get best 11. But if there was a second or third 11, I think he'd be in the conversation, because he has meant that much to this team while they've had to sort out D-mid, while he's had a rotating cast of characters next to him at the other center back position, while they have been wildly attack-minded with their fullbacks and wingbacks. Like all of it has been sort of like he's had to juggle it and keep everything at least passable. And he's done that while also bearing a significant burden in terms of build out and distribution. Just an excellent player, really savvy signing. And going back 12 months, as soon as that deal was inked, I was like, oh, it's going to work in Chicago, and probably pretty quick for Greg Berhalter.
Right, and he's been an interesting guy with the knock-ons from this back three system, because it's kind of giving him some freedom to show off his passing range, get forward a bit. You can tell he's a guy who at some point as a kid, because he was tall, got thrown up at striker by some youth coach in England, because he's just clearly has this desire to go forward, and scores a sort of hat trick over the weekend, own goal, 2 goals for himself. I'm curious when the last time in the MLS Team of the Match Day was a player who scored an own goal gets to start in the Team of the Match Day. That was fun. So yeah, again, and to your point, when there's been bad moments, they're obvious, but it's not always his fault, because to your point, not a whole lot of other help at times in terms of people you trust to really make big defensive stops. But no, that has, in the grand scheme of things, leadership off the field as well. He's just been such an asset to this team. We're going to talk about the overall playoff picture. The Eastern Conference field is largely set, at least in terms of the teams who will be there. Just a few things about order to figure out. But first, a time to say thank you and tell you about folks who make CHGO Fire and the other work we do here at CHGO possible. First, Eye on the Ball. Hey, coaches, listen up. If you're looking for more athletes to train, Eye on the Ball is where you need to be. It's simple. You create your profile, upload your background check, and boom, you are in. They've got a new promotion for coaches, a free first 6 months, and then just $50 a month or $500 for the whole year after that. Athletes of all ages and all sports can find you directly. And the best part is that Eye on the Ball does not mess with your schedule, your payments, or your business. You're in full control. They just connect you with athletes who are already looking for a coach like you. So if you're ready to grow your coaching business and reach more athletes, go check it out right now at eyeontheball.net. That's EYEontheball.net. That's eyeontheball.net. Don't wait. The athletes are already out there looking for you. CHGO Fire is also, of course, brought to you by our longtime friends at Shady Rays, and we've all had that moment where we realized we left our sunglasses somewhere behind on the beach, in a hotel room, anywhere else around, or you've had the moment where you drop them and you look and feel like you just saw money flash before your eyes when they break. But we here at CHGO found Shady Rays, and it changed the game for all of us because their sunglasses are made for real life. They're good looking, polarized, durable, and they're not stupidly expensive like some of those other brands. And of course, if you break your Shady Rays, if you lose your Shady Rays, even on the first day, they will send you a brand new pair, no guilt trip, no questions asked, just a brand new replacement so you can wear your sunglasses without fear, hiking, concerts, on the boat, going crazy in the stands when your favorite team scores a goal, hits a home run, whatever they're doing this time of year. Shout out to Chicago's 2 playoff sports teams. Shady Rays is the eyewear that has your back. We've teamed up with them to bring you an exclusive offer for CHGO listeners. Head to shadyrays.com and use code CHGO for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. All right, Matt, so as I mentioned, the Eastern Conference field, the gauntlet that is the Eastern Conference, the field of 9 teams for the postseason is set. The Philadelphia Union topping things off, having clinched the Supporters' Shield. All 9 of these teams are in the top 13 of the MLS overall table, which is insane for a lot of reasons. One, it just shows how lopsided it is, but when you account for the fact that all the Eastern teams are playing each other, it really kind of shows you how much stronger it is than the West this year. 1 game week fully to go, though there are 5 MLS games during the international break that are makeup dates from earlier in the year. Looking, though, at the table right now, Matt, the Fire currently hold the tiebreaker in wins over Orlando and Columbus. Right now, that sets up a possible wild card matchup against the Crew. Yes, if the Fire win their final game in New England and get some help, maybe some other things can happen. We'll get into that in a moment. But, how do you think this sets up for the Fire? The Crew are getting a couple guys back from injury, but if nothing else, the Fire are probably looking at their first playoff home game since 2009.
Yeah, it feels that way, doesn't it? Like they certainly are in control of their own destiny. And as you said, if something goes wrong with Orlando City or Nashville, even the Fire can jump out of the wild card spots entirely. But I think there has to be, they have to guard against the feeling of the job's done. Of we went unbeaten during this 4-game stretch and we punched our ticket and we're into the playoffs, because if they do that, they will lose on decision day, and then they will probably not be hosting that wild card game. They will probably have to go to Columbus because, look, man, I know the Crew have been in hell for the second half of the season, but what we saw from them last week is a team that has started to find itself because they battered Orlando City. And granted, they never found that second goal. But if a team with championship equity comes out and starts playing like that during crunch time, and it is crunch time in this season, and the Crew do have a lot of championship equity, I sit up and I take notice. If I was the Fire, man, I would treat decision day like a cup final, because I would not want to have to play Columbus in a one-off, be it at home or especially on the road. Like, they have to go out and they have to get 3 points in this game.
Right. And, in addition, to them looking more like themselves, Sean Zawatsky back, plays the full 90 in their last game. Diego Rossi is back. And then the big news over the last 24 hours in the league is that Darlington Nagbe is retiring from Major League Soccer. And so now you've got this big thing to, hey, here's this guy we're going to go out there and we're going to go play for, to try to send him off, this, this never lauded enough legend, trying to send him off with a good kind of cherry on top to his career. So yeah, no, I agree. And, playing a Wilfred Nancy team is always kind of scary, no matter what the Fire did against them a couple of weeks ago. So yeah. And then, geez, if you're in the wild card game and you managed to win that, congratulations. 3 nights later, you are playing in Chester, Pennsylvania against the Philadelphia Union. But again, don't count your chickens.
Right.
Few games with the Fire implications left. Of course, on decision day against New England, the Fire are playing in that game. Other than that, the big ones, Orlando against Vancouver in one of these makeup games this coming weekend over the international break. That's a weird one where anything can happen because, again, international break, Vancouver's still trying to integrate Ryan Gauld back. Orlando just, hasn't looked quite themselves these last few games. And then on decision day itself, in addition to the Flyers game, you've got Columbus against the Red Bulls, who kind of look dead, so you got to assume Columbus is going to win that one. Nashville against Miami, and Toronto taking on Orlando. Sean, when you get a chance, if we can throw up the possible Fire finishes here, because the graphic, the math gets messy here. Matt, you mentioned that there is even a scenario, and for our YouTube viewers, this is on the screen now, and I'll try to run through it quickly. They can get to sixth place, the Fire, if they beat New England, Nashville lose, and Orlando don't get a win in those final two games they have to play. They'll be in seventh if they draw on decision day, Orlando lose out, and Columbus don't win. Or if they win at New England and Orlando don't do well in their last couple of games, but Nashville at least get a point. Eighth place is where they're probably going to end up. We've got a lot of different ways this can happen. The Fire the Fire at any result. One more time, because the magic of audio. The Fire win, barring those other scenarios I've already mentioned, they're eighth, or with a draw or a loss, and a Columbus draw or loss because the Fire have the tiebreaker in the number of wins. Or then simply if, they don't outplay either Orlando or Nashville. And then, Matt, as you alluded to, they end up in ninth if they don't win on decision day, but Columbus do, the wild card game on October 22nd. Looking at how the bracket is lining up, if you look at the Eastern Conference right now, Matt, obviously Philly win the Supporter Shield, but this is just such a loaded conference. Do you think there's really any way to predict how, these next few weeks of MLS Cup playoffs are going to pan out in this conference?
No. If I did, I would be making so much money. But no, it's impossible. My rule of thumb this time of year, though, is like if you think a team is good and they're playing a home game, pick them to win. Mm-hmm. So if you look through the schedule, then I think it stays pretty much chalk at that point. It would maybe end up with Nashville jumping or Orlando jumping Nashville, but even that is just like it's a rule of thumb. It's not hard and fast, and injuries play a big role. Hot streaks play a big role. Like Lionel Messi is the greatest player of all time. He went 3 games without a goal out of nowhere, and that was it for the Supporter Shield race. And if it could happen to Messi, it could happen to Hugo Kuipers or Hani Mukhtar. So so it's like it's all really tough to predict, and the teams at the top of the table are so good that there's no point to sort of angling for a particular matchup, right? So I think
it's all going to be good.
Yeah, every single matchup is going to be tough. So I think the only way to play it is to just try to play your best and try to get on a roll and get into a place of good vibes, so that you roll into the postseason with some momentum. And if you can avoid the wild card on top of it, then that's a bonus.
Right. And then on the other side of things, entirely different things going on out in the Western Conference. No one would be surprised if every single first round series there was a 2 games and done scenario, given how much better the top 4 or 5 teams out there are. Right now, Matt, before we get you out of here, maybe you've got a better sense of feeling this one out. Western Conference, you take an LAFC or the Field right now to reach MLS Cup?
Field. LAFC have been really good, obviously, since Sun arrived, and there's great vibes and chemistry and all of the above between him and Denny Bouanga. But if you look at the schedule they've played, sharp and soft. They have not played. I shouldn't say that. They've played one playoff team since he arrived. That was San Diego, and they lost. So, this is not there's a lot of reason to believe in LAFC. I might actually pick them to win the cup, but it's not like I don't think they're as good as they have looked recently, because they have gotten to beat up on the dregs of MLS. I need to see them go up, against somebody good first. And honestly, with the way they're playing, they might not have to do that until the second round of the playoffs, because if they end up in that second or third seed in the West, they'll get Austin or Portland or maybe Dallas in the first round, and like none of those teams are legitimate threats.
No, no, they'll sweep by that. And yeah, again, then the Western Conference gets interesting once you get to the conference semifinals because
Yep.
Between LAFC and Vancouver and Seattle and San Diego, again, it gets fun out there once you actually narrow those teams down. Minnesota as well, although they've cooled off a bit, still a fun team to watch. And then one last thing, I guess we should end on a fire note. Matt, as somebody who's been around MLS a long time, as somebody who's covered the U.S. men's national team a long time, when you think about the season the 2025 Chicago Fire have had, what, if anything, have you learned about Greg Berhalter as a coach and as an operator in this league over these last, I guess if you include the offseason, these last 10 months?
He confirmed my baseline, my priors about him, which is that he's a really smart guy who thinks in terms of processes and then executes on that, and that keeps the floor really high, and gives whatever team he's coaching a chance to outperform expectations. The shock for this season is that he's done it in reverse, because if you look at what he did with the U.S. national team and Columbus before that, the first thing he did was fix the defense. Like the first thing he did was make sure that the defense was rock solid, and then build everything in attack from that. And it feels like it's been the opposite this year with the Fire, because as good as as improved as the defense has been year over year, I don't think it's anywhere close to solved. And it's definitely, as someone who watches the Fire very closely every week, that the defense is not the strongest part of the team. It's absolutely the attack. So it happened in the way I expected it to, and that the Fire were really good year over year, but also not in the way I expected it to. Because if you had told me, they'll score 35 goals and concede 34 and make it into the wild card, I would have said yes. If you told me they scored 55 goals and conceded 54, I would have said, no, what are you talking about? This is a Greg Berhalter team. But it shows what I know.
And here we are. No, I mean, we talked about Jack Elliot as a big free agent center back signing. I think a lot of people would think it would make sense for them to go out, pick a free agent MLS center back they really like, and throw a bunch of money at another one this offseason to keep trying to build from the back there. Well, it should be an exciting MLS postseason regardless of how the Fire do. Matt, remind all the people where they can see all the work you are writing and talking and doing on television covering America's premier soccer league.
Yeah, I got a newsletter that I do every week, tacticsfreezone.substack.com. And then I'm still writing for MLSsoccer.com and dropping in and doing the occasional podcast guest hit with folks like you.
Excellent. Well, thank you to Matt. Appreciate you for taking the time on CHGO Fire today. Thank you to Sean Anderson behind the scenes. For our YouTube viewers, CHGO Stars, where I'll be joined by CHGO Stars co-host emeritus Sandra Herrera, is coming up next, so we'd appreciate if you tune into that. A programming note for this show. Normally, the next show we would do would be in 2 weeks. That would fall the day before the MLS Eastern Conference wildcard game. And so, given that that is the scenario, the schedule might be a little different. So keep an eye out on my socials on the CHGO Fire, CHGO Sports socials for updates about what our plans are come playoff time. But for now, thanks to everybody for watching live on YouTube. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Alex Campbell. I'll see you next time on CHGO Fire.